Okay, I am going to introduce you to Adobe Premiere. This is starting you from scratch. So if you know a little bit about Premiere, I apologize, but some people have never opened it. And so the first time you open up Premiere, you'll see that it says Premiere Pro, and these are your settings up top. But I want you to notice that what these different windows are. And when I click on each one of these windows, you have to select which one is active. And you'll see that blue line around it. And that blue line is indicating that it is currently the active window. Now there's many different settings that you can have for what is the most useful layout of these windows, because you could move these all along. And up at the top here you see it says effects, audio, large timeline, 2 monitors, all this other stuff here. You can access this also by these workspaces. And what that just basically means is, depending on how many monitors, the size of your monitor, and what you're actually doing, you may choose to use a different setup. And by default, it came up as assembly. I typically think editing is a better way to start. So when I select editing, you'll see now that I've got 4 windows here that are active. Let me talk a little bit about what these windows are. All right, this first window is where you're going to keep your source footage. So like when we have clips to look at that are going to be here, this is going to show you the sequence. You're going to see the playback of your edited piece. This will be your timeline, and this is going to be your media and all different effects. And you'll also see like this little arrow here. When you click on that, that's a quicker way, like instead of scanning to each one of these things, you can simply select, let's say, media browser. And so here's going to show you some clips that are available. Okay. However, I don't want that right now, so let's go back to info. And so what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to first import some media that I want to work with. So the way I do that is I go underneath import, under file, and I'm going to go, I have some movies and some stock footage, and I'm going to pick up some of this stuff in here and say import. Okay, it's going to take a minute here. And now when I go into the media browser, okay, now that I've imported these clips, if I double click them, you'll see the clips in the source window, and I hit the play button, and that's playing the window, the footage. And here's some other footage. So if I double click it, it just shows me the clip that is in there. Okay, so here's my project name, and it's untitled, and you should never have anything called untitled. That's really a bad way to start things off, because sooner or later you're going to have about a dozen things that say untitled, and that's not helpful at all. So what we're going to do is we're going to say we're going to go to a save as, and let's just call this where you want to put it, and I'm going to put it in this documentary footage production 1, and I'll call this tutorial 1. All right, and I'm going to save it. And so now notice that the name of this project is tutorial 1. Okay. Also, these things are, you can modify them, like if you want to change the size. If you move things around a little bit, you'll see that you can save the setups that you have by going underneath Window, Workspaces, and then you can say Save that workspace. That has no impact on the actual edit that you're doing. It's really just how you have your space here. All right, the first thing I want to do is create a timeline. So underneath, or a sequence is what they call them here. So if I just take any clip, there's different ways of doing it, but let's just say new sequence, file, new sequence. Okay, and here it's going to give you a pop-up asking you what is the footage that the size of the file that you want to actually use. It's not that important, as I will show you, but by default I have mine set for 1080p at 23976 under ARRI. You'll see that there's all these other things in here, different codecs, and we'll be talking about codecs, but let's just leave that one for now. When I say OK, you'll see here now it created this timeline here for me. Okay, now the reason I say it's not that important is because watch what happens if I take a clip and I just drag it onto the timeline. It gives me this little pop-up and it says, this clip does not match the sequence settings. Do you want me to change the sequence to match this clip settings? You can either say no, keep the existing settings because I have a specific output, or in this situation I want to make sure it all is already the same type of footage. Why? This way I don't have to render it quite as much. So often you might have to be re-rendering footage if it doesn't match the sequence settings. You can always change this later, but for now I'm going to just say change sequence settings. Okay, so that clip is now in this timeline. There's no audio associated with that clip because you'll see that there's no audio on that clip. On these, this is my audio files or my audio tracks, and this is my video tracks. And let's say I want to have this actually on video track 1, so I just drag that down there. Okay, now if I want to play that back, all I have to do is hit the space bar, and that'll play back that footage, and you'll see that the blue timeline, the playhead is what this blue thing is called. So this is playing, it's showing you what is on the timeline, and when it gets to the end of this little clip here, it's going to stop, and that's how you view your clips. All right, so before we get into editing, I want to go through the settings a little bit. So underneath Premiere Pro CC, we're going to go under Preferences and select General. And now you have all these different pages, so General, Appearance, Audio, and all this other stuff. So let's start with General. And if I come up at Startup, it's asking me, so open up automatically the most recent file, or you can change it to be a different start screen. I'm just going to leave that alone. I'm not going to leave most of these alone, but what I want to show you here, some of these should be changed. So the video transition default is 30 frames, which is pretty long. So I always change that right off the bat to like half a second, or let's say 12 frames for half a second. And so that means from now on, when it automatically will make a transition of a half second, which is better than a full second for me typically. The other thing is the still images, I usually actually want that to be longer than 5 seconds, but it doesn't really matter. Another one I want to point out here is if you go to autosave, so right now it's selected to automatically save projects every 15 minutes. The maximum number of projects it's going to save is 20, so it'll start deleting the old ones. And where do you want to save that? We will adjust later on, but I like to leave it at 15 minutes. So if it crashes or whatever, at least you have a way to go back to that. And then we're going to say OK for now. There's plenty of other settings, but I kind of want to move along. Okay, so in the source window here, in the editing setup, basically the way it works is you're going to find the clip that you want. Let's pick something that's a little bit more distinct here. Okay, this is creepy, but we'll use this. And so I've got this little animation of this doll. Okay, so I'm going to start. Where do I want it to start? I want to start it right before the baby's head moves. So I'm going to make an endpoint, and I can hit the letter I, or I can click on this little thing here. And if I let the header I, it creates an endpoint. You'll see that now there's a gray area where that endpoint has been identified. And let's say I want it to go before it starts to move forward, and I'm going to make that my out point, or the letter O. Okay, so of the entire media clip, it's only going to take that endpoint to out point. All right. Now, it's important to notice where your playhead is. I'm holding in the Shift key to have it snap. See how it snaps to that clip, to the edge of that clip there? If I let go of the Shift button, it doesn't snap, so I don't actually know if it's sitting on the end or not. So by holding the Shift, I get that little triangle, and it tells me that it's locked there. Okay, so now I'm going to click on this window again to make it active. You see the blue border here. And underneath here, when I hover my cursor over these different things, you have Insert, Overwrite, and this is Export Frame, which is for something else. But so it's really these two are my edits. Okay, there's different ways of doing it. You can actually just drag it to the timeline, and that will work too. But it's important to know what these two different things are, because once you have a very complex edit, you don't really want to be dragging things to your timeline all that much, because it's easy to screw things up that way. But I'll just say overwrite for now. And you can't really see the edit, but if I expand it, the little bottom part here allows me to zoom in. And so I have two different clips here. I have this first clip with the candles, and then I have another clip of the baby here. Okay, so let's say there's too much of this piece in the beginning here. There's a lot of different ways to edit this, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click on this razor blade tool, or the letter B, and if I then click on it and then put it over, hover over the little timeline where I want it to cut, it makes an edit point there. I go back to my arrow, and then I'm going to just delete it. Notice it left all that space at the beginning. I'm going to undo that, which is Command Z, and if I right click and say ripple delete, it's going to get rid of that part at the beginning. So now my edit is looking like this. And when it gets to that edit point, you'll see the cut. All right, and now let's say I want to make this even shorter. I can click on the timeline itself without the blade tool and just shorten it. And notice what it's doing in the viewer window here. So as I drag this, it's showing me where my edit point is. So let's say you have a very specific place where you want to cut. You're trying to do some match action cutting or something like that. Then I'm going to do that, and then I could just let go and then drag this to snap it to match this edit point over here. Okay, so now I have less of the candles, and this baby cuts right over there. All right, so I showed that was an insert or an overwrite. It would have looked exactly the same. The difference is now if I wanted to put something, let's say I want to make an edit point, I'm holding in the shift key to snap on that edit point, and let's find another clip. All right, we have this footage of traveling through these glaciers, and I'm going to say in point, and I'm just randomly selecting O for out point, and let's say I want that edit point to go right in between those. That is an insert edit. So if I, with this window selected, I hit insert, it drops that footage in between those two clips. I'm going to undo that just to show you if I had done overwrite, what it does is that obliterated, it just went on top of the doll footage. And so the difference between the insert is that it pushes it forward, and the other one just goes on top of it. I'm going to undo that and replace that again with insert. So you want to get really familiar with Command Z, because that is something that we do all the time. All right, so we have our edit there of these three clips. And one of the things that I want to do just to wrap up this particular first tutorial is I want you to look at the sequence drop-down menu, and it says sequence settings. And remember at the beginning when we selected the ARRI 23976, what I want you to notice here is that you can change the video files here. Like right now it's 1920 by 1080, because that's, if you remember, I had it automatically adjust to the footage as opposed to first creating a sequence. So the way this footage was shot was 1920 by 1080, square pixels, no fields. The audio rate is at 48 hertz. And I want you to see that if you need to change any of this stuff, this is where you're going to do it. Then we're going to say OK. And the other thing I want to make sure you understand is when you do a save as or save project, what it does is it's going to create this file here. You see where it says tutorial 1. This is the name of my project file. So it's an Adobe Premiere project file. Okay. And the way you're going to acknowledge a PR proj, so that's the extension that is going to be associated with that file. These files are pretty small, okay? So if you think you're saving all your footage with this file, it's very different. So this is just all your edit decisions. It has nothing to do with the media. So all the media that you see here is not linked to this innately. So this is just your 3 edits that it remembers. That's all that is your project file. So I hit save. So it's really important to know, where does your footage live? Okay, so I happen to know, I'm going to go to the Finder window for now. I happen to know that my footage is under Movies, and it's inside this stock footage here. Okay, so if I look at this stuff, I want you to notice the size of these files. So this glacier footage, this thing, is big. It's 657 megabytes. It's a QuickTime movie. So that's pretty large, okay? So if you have a 2-hour film, you're going to have terabytes of information. And so your footage files have to be saved on an exterior drive. And the file that has your edit decision, which is equally as important, is just a different file. That one lives on my external drive. And I want to look at this file. I want you to see the project file is only 31 kilobytes. It's very, very small. That you can put on a flash drive, and you can back it up on your hard drive. You can back it up on a flash drive, and you can have multiple copies of this particular thing. But I want you to understand that this project file, all it does is a pointer. It says, okay, this clip, if I click on this and I show properties, what it does is it shows me, okay, where does the file that it's referencing actually live? Okay, you'll see that it's in D-Liban movie stock footage, and here's that file. It's telling me the file size, it's telling me the image size, the frame rate, and all this other stuff. Okay, so what's important to understand is that these clips are not inside Premiere. It's only referencing those clips. It's pointing to where they actually live. So if I went in there and then I moved one of those clips off of the place where Premiere thinks it's living, it's going to go offline and you're not going to be able to see it. So it's really important that once you've identified it, you will try not to move that. It happens, but then you have to just relink that file. And it's pretty easy to do. If I right-click it, I can then say, I can just say link media. Right now it's grayed out because I don't have to link. It's already connected. If it was not connected, this would be available for you to try to link it back. Okay? So I'm going to stop here for now.